Welcome to the 2025 African American Read-In. So glad that you are here. Welcome to everyone who is here physically with us in the room. Especially I want to make a note of the fact that we've got some guests on campus, some here for our African American Experience Day, some here as alums or other supporters of the seminary. So everyone who's here physically, both from our regular seminary community and those who are guests, welcome. But I also want to extend a welcome to people who may be joining us online. So we are very happy to have not only some online observers, but some of our readers will be online, and they will be appearing right here. So welcome to all of you. If you are a reader today, someone who's volunteered to read, I just ask that you be sure to stay behind the podium. Some of you may be, like I usually am, kind of a wanderer, but try to restrain that and stay here so that the camera can see you and your voice can be picked up on the microphone for our online participants. I'd like now to say just a very brief word about this event. This is part of a national celebration of the African American Read-In. So institutions across the country are having such an event, each one taking its own slightly different form, but the common factor is that in all cases we are lifting up the voices of African American authors. And so here you can see how it's unfolding, and other places it's a little different, but we're very happy to have people today who will be reading for us some work from African American authors. The Cultural Diversity Committee is a sponsor of this event. I'm the chair. I don't know if I introduced myself. I'm Sue Garrett. I'm a professor of New Testament and also the chair of the Cultural Diversity Committee, which is a major sponsor of our committees for this event. My colleague, Dr. Persavia Prelo, who is the director of Black Church Studies, will be saying a word of welcome also in a moment. They are also a sponsor of the event. So this event's been going on at Louisville Seminary for some years. Started out by Kathy Mapes and Sherry Arconti in our writing center. Many of you know Sherry. Kathy has passed away, but was a very stalwart member of our community for many years. And so they ran this event for a long time, and then Cultural Diversity Committee came in to assist and give some financial support and so forth for the event. So I'm going to now ask my colleague, Dr. and Dean Deborah Mumford, to come and just say a word of welcome on behalf of the institution.
Good afternoon. I'll make it very short. You've been welcomed. I want to welcome you again on behalf of everyone here at Louisville Seminary. This is always a wonderful event, and just for us to celebrate the literary and artistic genius of people of African descent, which has evolved out of their experience in this country. So you will hear from a lot of different people, from a lot of different voices and experiences. So just want you to sit back, just relax, and enjoy this time, and welcome to our campus.
Welcome, everyone. Greetings. I'm Dr. Persavia Prelo, Director of Black Church Studies. I want to welcome you all to the African American Read-In, as you have been already welcome. This is my first read-in. I've been here about 7 months now, and we have been planning as a committee, and it really is a delight and a joy to lift up the voices of African descent people as we engage in a read-in. I'll be very brief. I just want to remind everyone that we have our upcoming Black Church Studies consultation. The theme this year is Call and Response, the Black Church at the Intersection of Faith and Action. And so our screen to the left will lift up various expressions of the conference. And so we invite you to register. We'll send information out to everyone who's registered and encourage your participation. But also to just enjoy yourselves, and welcome to Louisville Seminary. So we're glad to have all of you. At this time, I'd like to introduce you all to our invited guest lecturer this afternoon, Reverend Dr. Michael Brandon McCormack, who is not a stranger to Louisville Seminary. So we're actually welcoming him back today. Dr. Michael Brandon McCormack is professor and chair of the Department of Pan-African Studies, professor of Comparative Humanities, Religious Studies, and director of the Ann Barton Institute for Social Justice Research at the University of Louisville, where in 2024, he was awarded the university's Distinguished Faculty Award for Service. In his many publications, he has explored the intersection between Black religion, popular culture, the arts, and activism, and is currently focused on the discourses of Afro-pessimism, Afrofuturism, Black optimism, and notions of Black joy as resistance. Dr. McCormack finds deep joy in speaking beyond the ivory tower in places where everyday folks are gathered and engaged in collective meaning-making, spiritual strivings, and freedom dreams. Let's welcome Dr. McCormack.
All right, good afternoon. How are you all doing today? I think I'm gonna be reading for a little bit, so I'm gonna get a chair so I can have a seat and make myself at home. And I'm gonna grab this stack of books and I'll be right back to the podium. Thank you. All right. How y'all doing today? There is a lot going on in the world, which is maybe the understatement of the day. And so it is good just to be here in this space and to see all of y'all. Look how many of y'all are out today. This is beautiful. I am so glad to see it. I'm glad to be back at LPTS, as has been said. I came here and taught a year. When I was finishing up my dissertation at Vanderbilt, I was a theology and practice extern and taught with the Black Church Studies program and taught in preaching and have co-taught since with Dean Mumford and done lots of things over the years. But after COVID and after I took on many more administrative responsibilities at the University of Louisville, I've been over here less and less since. And so it's just really good to be back here today. So I appreciate Dr. Sue Garrett and Dr. Xavier for inviting me to be here back at LPTS today and to be here for this year's African American read-in. A tradition that began more than 30 years ago as a celebration of Black literature and a space to lift up the voices and words that have shaped our history and continue to shape our future. But I would submit that today, in this moment, in this country, an African American read-in has perhaps never been more necessary, more urgent, more sacred. We're living in a time when Black stories, Black voices, Black truths, indeed Black bodies are under assault. Across this country, books are being banned. African American studies as an academic discipline is being dismantled. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are being slandered as dangerous. The very act of reading our stories, of speaking our truths, is being framed as a threat to power. And in a way it is. Because for centuries, Black literature has been a practice of survival, a practice of resistance, and to your theme, a practice of love and of liberation. And that's why today we gather not just to read, but to remember, to reclaim, to insist that our words matter, that our stories matter, and that we ourselves, that our lives matter. And so before I begin, I want to situate myself in that tradition of Black literature and thinking, because to understand why I sit here today, to understand the love and the liberation that have shaped me, you first have to understand something about where I come from. So I was invited to read either things that I've written or things that other folks have written. I'm gonna do a bit of both. So I'm gonna open with a piece that I wrote for an event at the University of Louisville called Meet the Professor. And it goes like this. I am the great-grandson of Bessie and Mac Langford, of Arville and Ella Mae Gooch, the grandson of Lucille and Jack Bowman, Beatrice and William McCormack. All rural black folks born and raised in Kentucky. None of them matriculated through the halls of anybody's university. All of them walked through the halls and aisles and pews of Black Baptist and/or African Methodist Episcopal churches. All of them walked through the streets, stores, barbershops, beauty shops, bars, juke joints, and other black so-called secular but no less sacred spaces. All of them navigating the madness of being black in America. I'm told that I'm too young to remember, but Ella Mae was literally driven to mental illness. And while I can remember moments when my otherwise mild-mannered father was driven to a white-hot rage behind some act of racism. All of them attempting to keep such madness at bay while trying to hold space for joy. I remember vividly both hand-clapping, foot-stomping black church choirs singing off but on-key songs like "Said I Wasn't Gonna Tell Nobody, but I just couldn't keep it to myself, what the Lord has done for me," as well as the anthem of my 1980s childhood family gatherings, "Cool in the Gang, Celebrate Good Times." Come on. It's important to begin here to situate myself genealogically among and within the context of the pains and joys of my people, because it is impossible to meet this professor without meeting or at least having a sense of the trials and tribulations and triumphs of the everyday rural black folk from Danville and Moreland and Stanford and Bergen and Harrodsburg and other small and seemingly insignificant places who reared and raised him. It is impossible to get a sense of this professor of African American religion without a sense of those unlettered but unfettered folks at Allen Chapel AME Church, an historic church named after Richard Allen, who together with Absalom Jones walked out of St. George Episcopal Church in the late 1700s after being pulled from their knees for daring to kneel and pray in the front of white folks' church, and went on to found the first black denomination, the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Mother Bethel AME, where black folk could worship their God with dignity away from the violence of the white normative gaze of this so-called Christian nation. To meet this professor of black religion and culture is to come to know what it means to be shaped by that tradition. It is to understand the first significant religious education that I received was not in the form of an academic treatise such as Emil Durkheim's Elementary Forms of Religion in the Southern Ivy League halls of Vanderbilt University, but rather in the form of a makeshift icon hung on a bare cement wall in the back of Allen Chapel AME Church. It was a poorly drawn picture of a young black boy. Above the picture were the words, "I know I'm somebody." And below, "Because God don't make no junk." Do not be deceived by the broken English. It is in this intentional deployment of double negatives that there was a positively charged message of dignity and value and worth and somebodyness instilled by these folks whom the world would view as less than nobodies. It was a black folk religious and proto-black liberationist theological claim. Indeed, a defiant insistence of that mantra that only recently came to be articulated as Black Lives Matter. Perhaps this is why it has been said that no matter how seemingly conservative at times, the black church has always been a left-of-center project insofar as it is born out of the insistence that black people are human in the face of white supremacist constitutional claims to the contrary, that at best they were 3/5 human, and at worst chattel, property, primitive, and savage. But these rural folks in these black churches insisted that black lives mattered to God, if to no one else. Yeah, thank you. It's important to begin here, again, to situate myself genealogically among and within the pains and joys of my people, because love and liberation, as your theme, are not abstract ideas. For my ancestors, they were the difference between survival and erasure. And today they remain just as urgent. Again, I've said books are being banned. DEI is being dismantled. The attack on African American literature is an attack on the truth itself. But as James Baldwin reminds us, love and truth are inseparable. Love demands honesty, and honesty demands justice. So in his book, The Fire Next Time, when James Baldwin is writing to his nephew, he too thinks about his genealogy, his place of birth, and where he is born. And he says to his nephew, quote, "You were born where you were born and faced the future that you faced because you were black and for no other reason. The limits of your ambition were thus expected to be settled." Baldwin reminds us that to love ourselves, we must first unmask the lies imposed on us. If love demands truth, then we must also ask, what happens when language itself is under attack? When words are distorted, twisted, and weaponized to keep us from naming our reality. The scholar and poet Elizabeth Alexander warns us that we are living not only through a crisis of violence, but also a crisis of speech, a moment when the power of words is being used not to build bridges, but to burn them, not to educate, but to misinform, not to enlighten us, but to make us all the more ignorant of the ways in which power is operating in our world. So I want to read perhaps the most lengthy passage here from Elizabeth Alexander's book, The Trayvon Generation, that she wrote a few years back in the midst of everything that was happening in the wake of summer 2020. I think this is appropriate for a seminary context. The title of her first essay in that book is called, What Will Be the Sacred Words? What will be the sacred words? She writes, "The problem of the 21st century remains the color line. Yes, we are mired in overlapping societal struggles and challenges, but white supremacy and its many manifestations, some of them sly and cloaked, some of them clear as a Confederate flag flown by marauders in the U.S. Capitol, has been a fundamental problem for every generation in this country since black people first came to this land. W.E.B. Du Bois's "How does it feel to be a problem?" is still the question implicitly and explicitly directed at black people. The race work of the generations of my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, and myself is the work of our children's generation. I don't wring my hands that we didn't fix it. Clearly, it's unfixable by us alone. White supremacy is not the creation of black people. I both lament and am enraged that this work is undone and that our young people still have to wrestle with it. Racial ideologies are insidious. They instruct in intricate ambient teaching systems. The country is their classroom, and everyone is in school, whether they choose to be or not. Thus, the color line is a fundamental, formative, constitutive American problem. I was raised in troves of blackness, born in a black metropolis, Harlem, USA, reared in Chocolate City, Washington, D.C., which in my childhood was nearly 3/4 black. From my family, I was given a sense of pride in our people and history, the need to understand myself as part of a larger whole and to be as helpful as I could to others, the familiar imperative to work twice as hard, and the responsibility to speak up when injustice was done. When I found my professional path, it was as an educator, a scholar of black culture, and an organizer of words, mostly poems. I wrote and thought and taught about the importance of witnessing, about the crucial functions of storytelling and history, about how the specter of violence hangs as constantly as the moon over black people. I found knowledge and guidance in words and possibilities in music, dance, and art where I could go outside of words and access feeling and deep knowing. In black history and culture, I encountered the full range of human experience, conundrum, perseverance, beauty, foible, and particularity. Here, everything could be understood, and I evangelized in my teaching and writing about this wellspring. I believed that representation mattered, and that if more of us occupied spaces where justice-minded decisions could be made, power shared, and examples set, the race could move forward, and with that, all of society would strengthen itself and mend the corrosion of ignorance and racism. Here is the thorny truth. While many sectors of society are now more integrated, violence and fear are unabated, and the war against black people feels as if it is gearing up for another epic round. Racial violence exists in a long continuum, and we refuse to understand that at our peril. Though I may worry in particular ways about my own sons, as do other parents of black children, this is a worry that we all must share. When human beings look at other human beings in their midst and instead of seeing other human beings, see a threat, see something monstrous, or don't see at all, our very humanity is at stake. Layered atop the never-ending anxiety of parenting, black parents live with the truth that we cannot fully protect our children. As a people, we have lived with too much suffering, and we live among many others who do not go through life with the same degree of precarity and loss. When yet another young black person is shot dead in their neighborhood, while jogging, in their bed, we brace in anticipation of the tableau to come, the neighborhood funeral, the raw grief of mothers, the unlikelihood of a trial, and if a trial, the character assault on the person who was murdered. They were out too late. They were in the street and not on the sidewalk. They had smoked a little weed. They passed a counterfeit bill. They dangled an air freshener from the back window. They asked why they were being stopped. They had a shiny object that turned out to be house keys in their hands. We who live consciously in this reality stay distracted and anxious. Those feelings heightened when there is a trial and our faith is tested once again and our children feel no safer. Our anxiety may even stifle the joy and exuberance that should characterize their childhood. In addition to the crisis of violence against people of color, we are at the outer edge of an era of crisis wherein speech has been debased from the highest levels of governance. An abusive language and its violence are increasingly ambient. Words are vessels filled with meaning and intent. Our language is what we live in, and thus how we collectively express ourselves, one voice at a time. If we believe in the power of words, and that words matter, and that precision with words matter most, and if we believe that words not only carry meaning, but also carry something human, that shared language and the exchange of language are among the things that make us human, and if we believe that striving for absolute truth with the word is one of the ways that human beings can communicate deeply enough in order to overcome that which is not understood between us, if we believe also that there is too much language in the air right now that is imprecise, false, harmful, operating not to bridge understanding, but to create misunderstanding, to divide, and that there is very precise, if inelegant language that is being used for the purpose of misnaming and dividing us, then we must ask, what is the power of our words? How are we responsible for them? What can we do with them? And do words move us closer to the hoped-for ideal of beloved community? The times stay challenging, and our society urgently needs repair. The fundamental proposition and question that arises at the end of the poem Kaaba by Amiri Baraka, published in 1969, continues to resonate. We need magic. Now we need the spells to raise up, return, destroy, and create. What will be the sacred words? I hear it in my head most days. What will be the sacred words? Yeah. In a seminary context, As a trained homiletician, I want to ask you, as you meditate on Alexander, what is the power of our words? How are we responsible for them? Can words move us toward the beloved community or away from it? Alexander challenges us to consider what are the sacred words. What words will we use to counter the lies, to bridge understanding, to name ourselves when others would erase us? Toni Morrison answered this question a long time ago in her own way. Morrison told us that black people, stripped of name, dignity, and even language, had to find new ways to love and affirm ourselves, and so we did. And so she writes so beautifully and eloquently in that very familiar passage and scene in her novel, Beloved, where Baby Suggs Holy, that unlicensed and uncalled itinerant preacher, goes out into the place called the clearing, and she begins to offer up her sermon to her community. Hear Morrison's words. Here, she said, in this here place, we flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in the grass. Love it hard. Yonder, they do not love your flesh. They despise it. They don't love your eyes. They just as soon pick them out. No more do they love the skin on your back. Yonder, they flay it. And oh, my people, they do not love your hands. Those they only use, tie, bind, chop off, and leave empty. Love your hands. Love them. Raise them up and kiss them. Touch others with them. Pat them together. Stroke them on your face, because they don't love that either. You got to love it. You. And know they ain't in love with your mouth. Yonder, out there, they will see it broken and break it again. What you say out of it, they will not heed. What you scream from it, they do not hear. What you put into it to nourish your body, they will snatch away and give you leavings instead. No, they don't love your mouth. You got to love it. This is flesh I'm talking about here. Flesh that needs to be loved. Feet that need to rest and to dance. Backs that need support. Shoulders that need arms. Strong arms, I'm telling you. And oh, my people out yonder, hear me. They do not love your neck unnoosed and straight. So love your neck. Put a hand on it. Grace it. Stroke it. And hold it up. And all your inside parts that they just as soon slop for hogs, you got to love them. The dark, dark liver, love it. Love it. And the beat and beating heart, love that too. More than your eyes or feet, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb and your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart. For this is the prize. And saying no more, she stood up then and danced with her twisted hip the rest of what her heart had to say, while the others opened their mouths and gave her the music. Long notes held until the four-part harmony was perfect enough for their deeply loved flesh. Yeah. I think those are the sacred words. Yeah. Morrison teaches us that love is not given to us. We must claim it, protect it, and refuse to let it be erased. If Morrison teaches us that love is not just about healing from the past, it must also confront the present. And in the present, power still refuses to relinquish itself. A world where those who have built their lives on suffering will do anything to maintain it. And that's where this profound author and essayist, our dear Mississippi brother, Kiese Layman, takes us in his set of essays, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. He has an essay there entitled Mississippi, An Awakening in Days. I want to read an excerpt from Kiese's essay. Day 13. 130,646 Americans are dead from coronavirus. Mississippi is surging. President Donald Trump and Governor Tate Reeves have failed to make masks mandatory or say, I was wrong. I was sorry. Here's what I want to believe. Tate Reeves and all these white Mississippians who, just like us, immediately smell the difference between a collard and a turnip, who come from sharecroppers, who hear that bended brilliance in the blues, who hate the way Northerners use the South as a convenient shield against their trespasses, who feel the daily grace black folks from the Deep South have offered white folks from the Deep South in the face of unrelenting humiliation, are being played by a devilish, desperate Northerner who has allowed his daddy issues and inability to honestly revise to ruin and eventually run his marriages, businesses, friendship, soul, and now his nation further into hell. There is part of these white Southerners, like Tate Reeves, our white cousins by blood and culture, who refuses to heed the spirits of awakening. That is not evil or irrecoverable, but just easily seduced by power, inferiority complexes, and a longing to be accepted by a manipulative maniac who glided into the presidency with the cowardly winds of white American resentment at his back. Here's what I know to be true. Tate Reeves and most of these white men of Mississippi are no more regionalist or lovers of Mississippi and the Deep South than Donald Trump is a patriot and lover of the United States of America. They are not haunted by phantoms. They are dedicated ghouls, spirit-repellent patriarchs who use each other and a muddled understanding of Jesus Christ to ensure the suffering of the most vulnerable. Abusive power tastes, touches, smells, sounds, and feels really good to gobblers of grace. They are not 19-year-old boys trying to decide between right and wrong. They are grown men who have chosen to model meanness for their posterity. They will torture and humiliate everyone close to them to maintain the power to abuse. They will never ever say or mean, I am sorry for making living harder than it needs to be. I am sorry for feeding off your humiliation. I am sorry for never confessing my actual sins to the world. I am sorry for never confessing my actual sins to the world. I am sorry that your life means less to me than my ego. They will never say, I am sorry. They will only remind Americans and Southerners foolish enough to listen that it all could be so much worse. The truth is, were it not for this awakening led by our young people and old spirits, they would be absolutely right. We are awakening, I want to believe. But the worst of white folk will not be persuaded. They can only be beaten. And when they are beaten, they fight more ferociously. They bruise us. They buy us. That is why we are so tired. That is why we are awakened. We are fighting an enemy we've shown exquisite grace, an enemy we've tried to educate, coddle, and outrun, an enemy that never tires of killing itself just so it can watch us die. I must buy a gun if I continue to live in Oxford, Mississippi. So I cannot continue to live in Oxford, Mississippi no more. It took way too much Black death to get here. And yet, but somehow, here is where I'd love to live without guns, without prisons, without monuments of humiliation, without insistent desecration of indigenous life, without the undervalued expected sacrifice of essential workers, without unattended cowardice and addiction, without the worst of white folks. Here is where I'd like to tenderly, honestly, radically, responsibly live and love with you. S.A. Lehman is one of the most brilliant and powerful writers and essayists that we have of our time. Cassie Lehman tells the truth that we don't always want to say out loud. That white supremacy is not just ignorant, it is intentional. It is relentless, and it drains us. And yet, despite all of it, we are still here. We are still shaping something beautiful out of what was meant to break us. We are still surviving. And that poet named, who shares my grandmother's name, I like that, Lucille Clifton, reminds us to celebrate that fact. And I want to read a poem of hers that is one of my favorite, that helps us in light of what Kiese had to say. She has a poem entitled, "Won't You Celebrate With Me?" Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come, celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. It bears repeating. Come, celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Lucille Clifton's words remind us that simply existing, thriving, refusing to disappear in and of itself is an act of resistance and of liberation. But love can't only be about survival. It must also be about transformation, about creating a world where our survival is not a miracle, but a guarantee. And so I turn to a quick quotation from our late Kentucky feminist writer and scholar, Sister Gloria Watkins, Sister Bell Hooks, who in her book, All About Love, reminds us quite simply, when we choose to love, we choose to move against fear, against alienation and separation. The choice to love is a choice to connect, to find ourselves in the other. Bell Hooks reminds us that love is not just a feeling, it's a radical choice. It's a demand for justice. And that brings me back to Kentucky and back where I started, back to my own story, to the ways that love and liberation are not just theories, but matters of life and death. Because for me and for all of us, survival has never been guaranteed. And so I want to close with this piece that will be the first time that it has been uttered anywhere. I've been working on it and wrestling with it. I feel like Erykah Badu, who, when she said, "Now keep in mind, I'm an artist, and I'm sensitive about mine." So this is a work in progress. But I've entitled it Surviving 47. I've been dreading 47 my whole life. When I was 8, my grandfather died of lung cancer at age 63. When I was 20 years old, my father died of lung cancer at 47. But my father never smoked, not a single cigarette. So when the diagnosis came, it was not just cruel, it was absurd. It was unthinkable, a punishment without a crime. I was a junior in college, somewhere between grown and not. Learned how to write a thesis, but not yet how to pay a bill. Knew how to argue in a classroom, but not how to silence the voice in my head that said, "You're next." Because that's what I heard when my father died. That's what grief whispered to me in the middle of the night. That's what fear told me when I looked in the mirror trying to see him in my own face, wondering how many years I had left. If my grandfather made it to 63 and my father only to 47, then what about me? Was there a pattern, a countdown, some genetic destiny I couldn't outrun? That thought sat in the back of my mind through every milestone. When I turned 30, or 35, or 40. And when I hit 40, I knew my father hadn't made it out of that decade alive. And I wondered, would I? I turned 45 last year, and the thought crept in again. But now 47 doesn't just haunt me in my family history. It's here looming over all of us. Because 47 isn't just a number. It isn't just an age anymore. It is Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States. A different kind of death sentence. My father was the antithesis of Donald Trump. A good man, a God-fearing man, a black working class man from Kentucky who never went to college but worked his way up from poverty to a professional career. He was born into a world where the deck was stacked against him, one of 15 siblings, the second oldest of the boys, carrying the weight of the responsibility from the time he could walk. He wasn't class conscious, not in the way that academics like to define it, but he carried a survivor's guilt, a deep, unshakable sense that because he had made it out, it was his duty to reach back, to help, to give, even when it stretched him thin, even when it took more from him than he had to give. Donald Trump was born into money, given everything and earned nothing. A man who hoards wealth like a dragon hoards gold, who has never lifted a finger for anyone who could not advance his power. A man who worships himself while demanding others do the same. A man who sees suffering and smiles because he knows he can profit from it. My father worked himself weary making sure other people were okay. Trump makes sure no one but billionaires like himself ever will be. And now he's back from 45 to 47. A man who has already shown us what he's capable of, given another 4 years to do even worse. The Supreme Court, his. Congress, his. The agencies meant to protect us, gutted. The people most vulnerable in this country, black folks, brown folks, immigrants, queer folks, women, the poor, left not only unprotected and unshielded, but targeted and under assault. A plane crashed in Washington, D.C. a week or so ago. A mid-air collision, everybody on board dead. Instead of mourning, instead of fixing what's broken, 47 blamed it on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because that's the lie they tell to keep power, that it's us, the ones trying to survive, who are the real problem. Not the billionaires gutting safety regulations, not the cronyism that's put unqualified men in charge of life or death agencies. No, it's DEI. It's justice. It's us. But we know the truth. My father did not survive 47. He fought a battle with cancer and lost. And now we stand at the threshold of 47 again. But the disease we face this time is not just in the body, it's in the body politic. It's in the laws, the policies, the courts, the mobs. It's in the unchecked power of those who see our suffering as a means to their ends. I've spent my whole life dreading 47, and now we all have to. But survival cannot just mean holding our breath and hoping we make it through. Survival must mean fighting. Fighting for the kind of country my father believed in, even when it failed him. Fighting for the kind of future that does not ask the most vulnerable among us to carry the heaviest burdens alone. Fighting for the generations coming up behind us so that they do not have to fear these numbers the way I have feared them. My father fought. He fought for his health, for his family, for his people, for his God. He fought until he could fight no more. And now it is my turn. And now it is our turn. 47 will not have the final word. Not over me, not over you, not over us. But if we are to survive this presidency, we'll have to fight for each other, with each other, not just to make it through, but to build something better on the other side. Because survival is not just about outlasting the storm, it's about making sure that we are still standing when it passes. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. McCormack. That was inspiring, and we are grateful. Perhaps you'd like to take your computer. We move now into a phase of a number of readers from our community, and our first group will begin with Dr. Bunmi Adla, who is our visiting professor here. In this group, we also have Nishan Lasley, who will be joining us via Zoom, Regina Newson, Latoya Jackson, and Latasha. And Latasha, I've forgotten your last name. Yes, thank you. And each of them will come up and just tell you again who they are, and we'll just kind of flow from there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bunmi Adegbola, and I am a visiting professor of New Testament at Louisville Seminary. So today, my reading is from a collection of poems by Lucille Clifton, and it's called Grief. Begin with the pain of the grass that bore the weight of Adam, his broken rib mending into Eve. Imagine the original bleeding, Adam moaning, and the lamentation of the grass, the earth. From that garden, through fields of lust, and found, to now, to hear, to grieve for the upright, animal, to grieve for the horizontal world. Pause then for the human, animal in its coat of many colors. Pause for the myth of America. Pause for the myth of America. And pause for the girl with 12 fingers. The girl who never learned to cry, who never learned to cry enough for anything that mattered. Not enough for the fear, not enough for the loss, not enough for the history, not enough for the disregarded planet, not enough for the grass. Then, end in the garden of regret, with time's bell tolling grief and pain. Grief for the grass that is older than Adam. Grief for what is born human, and grief for what is not. Thank you.
My name is Nishan Lasley. I just want to say quickly, thank you to the committee for allowing people to participate this way. I love this event and only at the last minute could not be there, so I'm grateful to still be allowed. I'm going to read two short things to you. First comes from the book Theopoetics in Color and Embodied Approaches in Theological Discourse. It's a book that kind of provides space for like meaning making voices and acknowledges like the theological imagination of theologians of color. This particular excerpt is from a piece written by Brian Bantam. He's a theology professor at Garrett Seminary. It's entitled "We with God and Asymptomatic Theology in 5 Parts." This is part 1. God. We were walking through the park the other day, and my 5-year-old asked me, "Where is God?" I'm not sure what sparked his question. A leaf falling from its branch, the wind chimes woken by the wind, the cat that curled its back up and stared at us as we passed. "Where is God?" he asked again. I took his cheeks in my hands and told him to look at me. God is in my face, and God is in your face. Look at your hands. God is in your hands. Look at the stick you've been carrying. God is in that stick. God is a stick. God is you. God is me, he asked. Well, no, I said. God is not you and me and the tree exactly. I was beginning to dig a hole for myself already. God is in all those things because God holds all those things together, I tried to explain. He does not look convinced. We bent down over a patch of dirt, and I scooped up a little pile and said, "The dirt is us. The hands are God." And I squeezed the dirt and pressed it till the oils and sweat of my palms mixed in, and then I spit a bit, just for good measure, which made my little boy laugh and laugh. That little pile of dirt became a ball, and I kept squeezing and rolling it in my hand to keep it dead. I am in this ball because part of me is in it. But the dirt isn't the same thing as me. I'm not the same as the dirt. But it has part of me. It stays a ball because I keep giving it something of myself. I keep giving parts of myself because I want it to be. I want it to be because I love it. He held his hand out to me. Can I be God now? He asked. And this super quick poem is from the poet and professor Edie Shoppers. This book is a Hurston Wright Legacy Award winner and either 2018 or 19 Pulitzer Prize nominated book of poetry. It's called Semi-Automatic, and that it delivers. But this is one of her softer poems in the book, and I just really appreciate it. It's called A One-Act Play. Create a livable world. You'll need water, trees and air, a food supply. You may want cell phones, condominiums, social hierarchies, but they're optional. Go ahead. Take as many days as you like. It's just a play. When you're done, you undo it. Be creative. Go wild. It should be a hard act to follow.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity. This is from my book, Unfair Encounters, but I just had the epiphany to change it to Favored Encounters.
Before you begin, could you tell us a little bit about your work?
Well, I am an author, I am a marketing professional, and I'm a woman of God. June 9th, 2013, we were in Buffalo, New York. The day prior, we had attended one of Gerard's high school teammates' wedding. We decided to go to Niagara Falls while we were there. It was an absolutely magical day. We got up early and headed to see the falls. We walked around window shopping before deciding on a tour. From there, we were chauffeured to different attractions along the falls. We stood in amazement, marveling at what God created. The day was perfect, the weather was perfect, and the man on my side was perfect. We were almost done with our trip when we were taken to the last destination on the tour, which was the best destination. We were right in the vortex, the nucleus of the falls, as high as we could get. I was on cloud 9, in pure bliss. While gazing at the rushing water, I began to dance in place because I just felt so incredibly blessed and euphoric to be in such a beautiful place with the person I loved the most. Gerard called my name, and it was as if I had been dreaming while awake, because it took him a few tries before he captured my attention. As I turned to look at him, he began to say with tears swelling in his eyes, "I just love you, baby. I just love you so much." And I responded with, "Oh, I love you too, babe." As I continued dancing in place because I just felt light. He began to descend to one knee while simultaneously taking a box from behind his back that contained the rock I had been praying for my entire life. I was shocked silent. I couldn't speak. I literally heard Kelly Price singing, "He proposed to me." For what seemed like minutes, I stared at him in pure, utter disbelief. "Will you be my wife?" I responded with tears belting out, an emotional yes, yes, yes. We hugged, cried, and basked in the newness of being newly engaged while onlookers and tourists cheered us on. That was one of the best days of my life. Thinking back on that day fills my heart with uncontainable joy. After the newness of being engaged finally set in, it was time to plan a wedding. But in order to pay for it, I needed to close my struggling brick and mortar clothing store and get a job that paid. Thankfully, a few months after relocating to Cleveland to be with my man, I found a job that paid pretty decent, but it came with a lot of baggage that I didn't sign up for. However, I had my mind set on the goal of staying long enough to help pay for my dream wedding and help us build a sizable nest egg before embarking on my next entrepreneurial pursuit. And besides, I needed the health insurance and vacation time for my honeymoon. For almost 2 years, I got up every day and forced myself to go into a place that I was not wanted or valued. But I endured for the promise of building with my life partner and the hope of Jeremiah 29:11 that states, "He knows the plans that he has for me, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper me and not to harm me, to give me a hope and a future." The issues I was experiencing were only temporary. That's what I told myself. No pain, no gain, right? September 27, 2014. On September 27, 2014, we accomplished exactly what we set out to do, with the theme, "All Roads Led Me to You," because we came from very different walks of life, traveled the entire world miles apart, unaware of the other's existence, but our most merciful Abba Father allowed everything to align in this great big old world, for every star to align to bring us together in holy matrimony on this glorious day. Adorned in white and gray with glimpses of vibrant yellows and golds in front of our family and friends, a Southern belle from a small town in Kentucky married a city slicker from Cleveland, Ohio, and Gerard Allen Jackson made me Mrs. LaToya Jackson. And on that day, I vowed to always take good care of his heart. We began the excitement of being newlyweds, traveling to Turks and Caicos and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. The world was our oyster, and we could not wait to explore it together, starting the new and exciting journey as husband and wife with Christ as our center. December 17th, 2014. My husband was coming home late. His company was taking them somewhere different every day for the holiday season. He and I talked throughout the day via Facebook Messenger. Our conversations were the funniest. He called me on his way to his last destination, talking about one of his co-workers' breath and how bad it was. We laughed and exchanged I love yous, and that was it. Yeah, that was literally it. That was the last time I would ever hear his laugh, his voice, his jokes, and the sound of his breath on this side. Just 2.5 months after our dream wedding, 1.5 years after working a job that I hated, after closing my business and moving to start my life with the man that at the time I loved more than myself, it was all over. Just like that. While driving home to me, he had a massive heart attack that caused him to crash into a semi-trailer. He was gone at the age of 31, and life as I knew it was over. My hopes and aspirations all came to a screeching halt on that cold winter night in December 2014. How do I live without you? How do you rebound from something as final as death? There is no resurrecting the one you love once our number has been called. That's it. Time is up. As a Christian, I struggled with accepting the fact that my husband was taken from me. It was incredibly hard to wrap my mind around the fact that a loving God would allow this to happen to me. I was mad at everyone, including God. My thinking was that being a good person hadn't gotten me anywhere. I prayed, even for my enemies, and treated others as I wanted to be treated. I remember wedding dress shopping, and I left the store with one of my bridesmaids to discover I still had on one of the necklaces that I had tried on with one of the dresses. The necklace was absolutely beautiful. My bridesmaid was so excited for me. Girl, you got a blessing today. I immediately said, I can't keep this necklace, girl. I didn't pay for this. I'm not blocking my blessings over a necklace. I'm taking this back immediately. She could not understand why I would take it back. She even told me to give it to her because she was also getting married. Needless to say, I took the necklace back, and I also removed her from my bridal party. I don't play those games. I began to reminisce on various events over the course of my life in which I made decisions that many people would have done the opposite. But because of my upbringing and my faith, at times, I took the road less traveled, and it all seemed to be for naught. God didn't care how righteous, kind, honest, giving, or loving I had been. He still took my love from me. I felt betrayed by God, and I began to question his motives. I never questioned his existence. But because of all the turmoil and strife in the world, I began to wonder why a loving God would allow such pain. I got to the point where I wouldn't pray to him per se, but I would talk to him and have conversations as if I were talking to anyone else. All I can say about that period of my life is thank God for people, friends, family, and compassionate strangers interceding on my behalf, petitioning for me, sending up timbers of restoration for me, love and healing for me. I know it is because of those prayers that I am here to give my testimony to others and to inspire them to continue on. Ecclesiastes 9:11, the race is not given to the swift, nor the strong, but to one that endures to the end. I stayed in the wilderness for years waiting to be set free from the overwhelming grief, anxiety, pain, and betrayal I felt from God. To be quite honest, there are still days I feel deserted and alone. It may take a few days, but I snap out of it remembering God's love and promises to give me a hope and a future. Everything is a process. Much like the cultivation of a diamond, which involves 4 arduous steps. First, carbon dioxide is buried 100 miles into the earth. Next, it is heated to 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Then it's squeezed to the tune of 725,000 pounds per square inch. Lastly, it is quickly rushed to the earth's surface to cool. It is believed that diamonds take 1 to 3 billion years to form, although the exact time frame is unknown. The process to create such exquisite gemstones are worth the wait. Like you and I, diamonds are hard, complex, and unique. But once they've gone through the rigorous process of perfecting them, they become bright, beautiful, and unbreakable. I was a diamond being buried, pressed, burned, and exposed. Preparation for the new woman of God I was intended to be. I didn't realize it while I was going through the storm, but once I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, I relinquished control. Once I did, miracles, signs, and wonders began to happen. We are all equipped as overcomers. The key to unlocking the treasures within are trusting and following God's plans and principles for our lives, one step, one process at a time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Latasha Smith. My pen name is Dr. Sonia Nicole Levi. I specialize in Greek mythology and Christianity to include practical theology. This excerpt I'll be reading for you is from chapter 6 of my book on pineal gland activation. The first description of the pineal gland and the initial speculation about its functions are to be found in the voluminous writings of Galen, the Greek medical doctor and philosopher who spent the greatest part of his life in Rome and whose system dominated medical thinking until the 17th century. Galen talked about the pineal gland in his 8th book, titled On the Usefulness of the Parts of the Body. He explained that the pineal gland owes its name to its resemblance in shape and size to the nuts found in the cones of the stone pine. He called it a gland because of its appearance and said that it had the same function as all other glands of the body, namely to serve as a support for blood vessels. The pineal gland or pineal body is a small gland in the middle of the head. It often contains calcifications as brain sand, which make it an easily identifiable point on reference in X-ray images of the brain. The pineal gland is attached to the outside of the substance of the brain near the entrance of the canal called the aqueduct of Sylvius, from the 3rd to the 4th ventricle of the brain. It is now known that the pineal gland is an endocrine organ that produces the hormone melatonin in amounts that vary with the time of day, but this is a relatively recent discovery. Long before this discovery was made, physicians and philosophers were busily speculating about its functions. The pineal gland produces the neurotransmitters serotonin and melatonin. Serotonin is believed to help regulate mood and social behavior, appetite and digestion, sleep, memory, and sexual desire and function, while melatonin inhibits melanin formation and is thought to be concerned with regulating the reproductive cycle. For those of you who do not know, you may see t-shirts that Black Americans are wearing saying melanin poppin', stands for brown skin. Melanin is what makes a Black person have brown skin. It is a mahogany brown to black pigment. It also occurs in the hair, skin, and iris of the eye in all people and animals. It handles the tanning of skin when exposed to sunlight, and melanin reproduces during the skin cycle. There are floating crystals in our brain that have an electromechanical effect on the brain's operations called piezochromism, which describes the tendency of certain materials to change color with the application of pressure. Piezoelectricity is the electric charge that accumulates in certain materials, such as crystals, ceramics, and biological matter, to include bone DNA, and in some proteins in response to applied mechanical stress. The word piezoelectricity means electricity resulting from pressure and heat. It is derived from the Greek word piezo, which means to squeeze or press. What brainwave frequencies are consistent with the production of the pineal gland's main chemical, melatonin? And the answer is delta waves, the brain waves we experience during sleep, dreamless sleep. As a matter of sleep, to use brain waves for pineal gland activation, you can listen to binaural beats and isochronic tones on iTunes or YouTube, or another similar platform that can activate those delta, theta, and gamma frequencies within your brain. In his revolutionary book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, psychiatrist and researcher Rick Strassman theorized that the pineal gland produces another important chemical called N, or DMT, very long word, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. And in 2013, Strassman, along with other researchers, did indeed find DMT in the pineal gland of rats. And it seems science is still unclear whether the pineal gland produces DMT or just regulates it. Nicknamed the spirit molecule, DMT is a natural hallucinogen capable of producing extraordinary visions and mystical states of consciousness like that of Ellen G. Harmon White, who is the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, and Joseph Smith, who is the founder of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In the 1800s, they both claimed that they had received visions and dreams, which was less than 200 years ago. This would have occurred with that spirit molecule called DMT. DMT is like the properties of lysergic acid, diethylamide, known as LSD or acid, but it naturally occurs in our body, just not in elevated levels. Whereas LSD is a synthetic drug, it is becoming increasingly popular for spiritual retreat centers in South America and abroad to offer LSD in microdoses to induce spiritual ecstasy in those who are trying to achieve a spiritual encounter in a controlled environment. Indeed, many people know they are not psychic, yet they also know they are connected to the world and connected to other people, and they seek guidance to hone their intuitive gifts. And I have told some of my clients that neutral craft is allowed when you use your intuition on your family and your friends, because it is not considered a form of witchcraft or intimidation that occurs with someone you don't know or you don't love. In DMT, Strassman explains, DMT exists in all of our bodies and occurs throughout the plant and animal kingdoms. It is a part of the normal makeup of humans and other mammals, marine animals, grasses and peas, toads and frogs, mushrooms and molds, barks, flowers, and roots. Amazingly, researcher Graham Hancock theorizes that DMT is the lens of the pineal gland that allows us to see wider areas of our reality that are usually inaccessible to us. DMT is present in the Amazonian botanical tea called ayahuasca. It is illegal to use ayahuasca in the United States, but people somehow get it one way or the other. Ayahuasca is a sacred tea made from the vine of the ayahuasca plant combined with the leaves of either chacruna or the chapranga bush. If you order my book, you also should check out chapter 13 on One Set of Twins, Two Different Mothers, where I talk about how the Bible refers, anytime the Bible refers to a set of twins, they will have different mothers. In its story of twins Esau and Jacob, Esau was blessed above and below, and Jacob was blessed below, as well as the time that the word came for Jesus to be born through the Virgin Mary. Her cousin Elizabeth was pregnant also at the same time. So they will have two different mothers. The Bible infers that Rebekah is the mother of Jacob, while Leah is the mother of Esau. Again, this is an inference, the firstborn twin. In the Zohar, the biblical commentary from Jewish Kabbalah, Rabbi Yossi is the son of Rabbi Shimon, son of Lacunia, asks Rabbi Eleazar, has your father explained why the blessings with which Isaac blessed Jacob did not prevail, and while the blessings Isaac bestowed on Esau did prevail? Rabbi Eleazar replies, all these blessings from their father prevailed, along with other blessings that the Creator himself gave to Jacob, Greek Yaakov. But at first, Jacob received his blessings above only, and Esau received below. When the promised Messiah, Hebrew Meshiach, will arise, Jacob will receive above and below, and Esau will lose everything. The implication here is that the firstborn, who is entitled to the blessings of the father, as you may or may not know, you're all Bible students, Genesis 27, the father of Esau and Jacob was blind or had low vision in Genesis chapter 27. And Esau was entitled to the blessing of the father as the firstborn. And the implication in these particular verses in Genesis 27 is that the firstborn who is entitled to the blessings of the father will have no portion and inheritance or remembrance in the world because his birthright was stolen or his birth certificate was stolen. Yet the coded language of the Bible divinely inspires us to seek another layer to the figurative meaning, which is the literal meaning. For stealing another person's blessing, their inheritance, Jacob will have no portion and inheritance or remembrance in the world. Essentially, what we want to do when we leave this world is to have a legacy, but because Jacob stole Esau's birthright, he has no legacy. As universal laws continue to prevail, anything stolen must be returned to its rightful owner. Even if the child was born via surrogate, it has to be returned to its biological mother. This is the meaning of the verse, and the house of Jacob shall be fire, and the house of Joseph flame, and the house of Esau for stubble. See Obadiah 1:8. You can find more information about me on my author website at www.sonianicolelevi.info. There you can access my Medium articles and feel free to join my spiritual life coaching group on Facebook.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our readers in our initial group. Just a word, we're kind of thinking we'll end up here at about 3 o'clock. So if you're on the roster to be a reader, bear that in mind as you read, that we need to respect the time of everyone here. I wanted to tell you that we have this wonderful new edition of the African American New Testament commentary, True to Our Native Land, and we will be giving out this copy. I had planned for us to make the drawing here, but I was not able to get the list of all of the people who have joined us online, so we're going to do it afterward, and one of you lucky people will get the word that you are going to receive this book as a door prize. So our next group includes Dean Deborah Mumford, Calvin Holloway joining us online, Kamar Ritchie, Africa Hands, and Lou Berkins. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. So I'd like to read 2 short stanzas from a poem called Dark Testament by Pauli Murray. Pauli Murray was an artist, a preacher, an activist, an attorney, did so much for us in the world. I was going to do a longer intro. My partner Africa said that the intro should not be longer than the stanzas of her poem that you are reading, so I will skip that and go straight to the stanzas. So 2 short stanzas, beginning with stanza 8. Hope is a crushed stalk between clenched fingers. Hope is a bird's wing broken by a stone. Hope is a word in a tuneless ditty, a word whispered with the wind, a dream of 40 acres and a mule, a cabin of one's own and a moment to rest, a name and a place for one's children and children's children at last. Hope is a song in a weary throat. Give me a song of hope in a world where I can sing it. Give me a song of faith and a people to believe in it. Give me a song of kindliness in a country where I can live it. Give me a song of hope and love and a brown girl's heart to hear it. That was the first stanza. Now I'll read stanza 11. And this, I think, is particularly apropos in a world where DEI is under assault. Tear it out of the history books, bury it in conspiracies of silence, fight many wars to suppress it, but it is written in our faces 20 million times over. It sings in our blood, it cries from the housetop, it mourns with the winds of the forest, when dogs howl and will not be comforted, when newborn lambs bleat in the snowdrifts, and dead leaves rattle in the graveyards, and we'll shout it from the mountains, we'll tell it in the valleys, we'll talk it in Miner's shack, we'll sing it at the workbench, we'll whisper it over back fences, we'll speak it in the kitchen, we'll state it at the White House, we'll tell it everywhere to all who will listen, we will lay siege. Let thunder serve our claim, for it must be told, endlessly told, and you must hear it. Listen, white brothers, hear the dirge of history, and hold out your hand, hold out your hand.
All right, hello, my name is Kamar Ritchie. I am a PhD student at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you all. I have just a few short ones that I wanted to read from. The first is from Langston Hughes, The Best of Simple. If you've not read his Jesse B. Simple stories, they are amazing. And I just want to read this one. This one's called Bones, Bombs, chicken necks. And for context, if you're not aware of this, essentially Jesse is this everyman of Harlem. And Hughes, who never identifies himself, is constantly interacting with him as his life unfolds in the city. This is Simple talking. For the first time since I've been married, said Simple, Joyce has not spoke to me all day. Did you speak to her? I asked. I tried, said Simple, but she did not answer. What happened? What's the matter? I asked. She's interfered with my habits, said Simple. What do you mean interfered with your habits? My pleasure and my ways, said Simple. Well, tell me, I said, if you are going to tell me. They were like this, Simple began. After dinner, I was sitting in my front window, gnawing on a pork chop bone, observing Harlem, and I had just got down to the juicy part. When Joyce says, Jesse B., why did you take that bone away from the table? I said, baby, to gnaw on. But not in the front window, says Joyce. It's my window, I said. It's also mine, says Joyce. And I do not wish to bone gnaw in there in public for the world to see. Not even in my own window? Most especially in our own window, said Joyce. What you are doing is real down homish, leaning from the window with a meat bone in your hand. You are my husband, and I do not wish everybody passing here by the street to see you. Eat at that table and stop eating when you get up. Do not please carry bones to the window. Ah, Joyce, I says. Ah, Joyce, nothing, says she. You do not see me leaning from a window with a bone in my hand. You're a lady, I says. And I hope you are a gentleman, says Joyce. People eat hot dogs in public in the Yankee Stadium, I says, and corn on the cob at Coney Island, so why can't I gnaw a bone in my own house? Inside the house, yes, says Joyce. But Jesse B., listen to me. Please do not gnaw that bone in the window, please. Which, when I saw she was so serious, I asked her, why? Said Simple. And you know what Joyce told me? Because Emily Post says don't. Baby, I says, Emily Post were white. Also, I expect rich. That woman had plenty of time to gnaw her bones at the table. Me, I work. When I get home, I want to look out on the street before dark and see what is going on. Since I'm married, I don't get out much. At least, honey, let me look out. Look out all you want to, says Joyce, but not with a bone in your hand. That is most inelegant. Inelegant hell, I says, and I sat right there, just you try to get this here bone away from me. I want Negroes to learn etiquette, says Joyce. Bone gnawing is not etiquette, at least not in public. I did not answer, and don't you know Joyce burst out crying. Do you reckon Joyce is pregnant? They tells me women's act crazy the way sometimes when they is in the family way. Why should Joyce care if I suck a pork chop bone in the front window or not? We ain't got no back window, and I do not see why a man can't gnaw a bone and look out in the street at that same time. Nobody is looking up, especially to see what I am doing. Nobody in the world cares if I gnaw a bone or not in my window. Nobody but Joyce. Which should make you happy, I said, that somebody cares when you commit a faux pas. What have I committed? Asked Simple. A faux pas, I said. It really is not proper to sit in the window gnawing on a bone. Is it a crime? Said Simple. It's not a crime, I said, but it's a faux pas. It must be something awful for Joyce not to speak all day, said Simple. Write that word down for me so I can tell her I will not commit it again. Faux pas. It is a French phrase, I said. Then, now I know how to say gnaw on a bone in French, said Simple. Faux pas boner, I said. Bone, says Simple. And there's one other thing which the Lord made and put on this earth almost as good as a pork chop bone. That is the neck of a chicken. One reason I very seldom like to eat in restaurants is because you seldom get a chicken neck. If they do serve a neck, it is not proper to eat it. So Joyce says, because you have to suck on the bones. Now, why is it not proper to suck a chicken neck in a restaurant? Because it makes so much noise in public and therefore is bad manners. Manners is sometimes mighty inconvenient, stated Simple. You may not care about manners, I said, but your wife does. Certainly, Joyce is a woman to be proud of. She tries to uphold the tone of the Harlem community. One reason why white people don't want Negroes in their neighborhoods is because they say we lower the tone of the community. Eating bones in the window just isn't done in high society. Who's in high society, asked Simple. Not me, and I don't want to be. White folks might not gnaw bones in windows, but they sure do some awful other things. They murders their mothers almost daily. I never read of so many children knocking off their parents as here of late, but you seldom read of a colored child doing such. White folks also Jim Crow colored people, which I do not think is good manners. I'd rather they gnaw a bone than segregate us. White folks blows off atom bombs and burns up people too. It looks like to me it would be better to gnaw a bone than to singe them Marshall Islanders all up, like them pictures that they showed after the big bomb test they had out in the Pacific. Them folks will never have no more hair on their heads, and them atomized Japanese fishermen never will have no more children. I think white folks would do better to sit in their front windows and gnaw bones myself, even if they were not so high-toned. Bone gnawing, to my mind, is better than bomb bursting. Atom bombs is low rating the tone of the whole world. When I gnaw my bone or suck my chicken neck, I am not hurting a human fool. You're hurting your wife if you make her feel bad, I said. So for Joyce's sake, if not your own, you could suck your chicken necks and gnaw your pork chops bones in private. In fact, consideration for others begins at home, which might, in a sense, explain the behavior of American white folks. They've gotten so accustomed to mistreating Negroes at home in the past that it is hard for them to come and care about what colored folks in Asia think. And if you keep on gnawing bones in spite of what Joyce thinks, after a while, you will not care what anybody else thinks either. From your own selfishness in regard to your wife's wishes, it is only a step to being inconsiderate of everyone everywhere. Consideration begins inside yourself first, right where you are, at home. Bones and bombs are not unrelated, pal. And certainly good manners are better than chicken necks or pork chop bones. From whence did you get such wrong information about such good food? Asked Simple. I also wanted to read shortly, and I will say I was nervous when you mentioned you were reading from this too, How to Slowly Kill Yourself and others. I'm like, oh, it's not my section, is it? But this is just a really short passage in here in his essay, and he's got a collection. If you have not read this, you really should. But this one's from The Worst of White Folks, and he just says, "The worst of white folks, I understood, wasn't some gang of rabid white people in crisp pillowcases and shaved heads. The worst of white folks was pathetic, powerful it. It conveniently forgot that it came to this country on a boat, then reacted violently when anything or anyone suggested its share. The worst of white folks wanted our mamas and grandmas to work themselves sick for a tiny sliver of an American pie it needed to believe it had made from scratch. It was all at once crazy-making and quick to discipline us for acting crazy. It had an insatiable appetite for virtuoso black performance and routine black suffering. The worst of white folks really believed that the height of black and brown aspiration should be emulation of itself. White Americans were wholly responsible for the worst of white folk, though they would make sure it never wholly defined them." And then, I'm just trying to be quick, but you guys wanted us to share something from who all has fed into us. And James Baldwin, I can't get enough of him. And he has this book he did, Nothing Personal. And that book means a lot to me because he did it with Richard Avedon. He was a very famous photographer. My mom actually named me after Avedon. That's my middle name. And I came across the book and read it, and Nothing Personal is just an essay going along with these poignant photos of just American life. And at the end of the book, this is what Baldwin has to say. He says, "I have slept on rooftops and in basements and subways, have been cold and hungry all my life, have felt that no fire would ever warm me and no arms would ever hold me. I have been, as the song says, buked and scorned, and I know that I always will be. But my God, in that darkness, which was the lot of my ancestors and my own state, what a mighty fire burned. In that darkness of rape and degradation, that fine flying froth and mist of blood, through all that terror and in all that helplessness, a living soul moved and refused to die. We really emptied oceans with a homemade spoon and tore down mountains with our hands. And if love was in Hong Kong, we learned how to swim. It is a mighty heritage. It is the human heritage, and it is all there is to trust. I learned this through descending, as it were, into the eyes of my father and my mother. I wondered when I was little how they bore it, for I knew that they had much to bear. It had not yet occurred to me that I also would have much to bear, but they knew it, and the unimaginable rigors of their journey helped them to prepare me for mine. This is why one must say yes to life and embrace it wherever it is found, and it is found in terrible places. Nevertheless, there it is. And if the father can say, "Yes, Lord," the child can learn that most difficult of words, "Amen." For nothing is fixed forever and forever and forever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down the rock. Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Africa Hands, and I'm a friend of the seminary. I am going to be reading a couple of poems from a book called Reparations Now by Ashley M. Jones. Ashley M. Jones is an award-winning poet born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Her poetry explores the impact of the Deep South on Black individuals. Ashley is the founding director of the Magic City Poetry Festival in Alabama. In addition to being a doctoral student, she is the current poet laureate of the state of Alabama. The position was established in 1931. Ashley M. Jones is the first Black person and the youngest person to hold this position. First poem I'm going to read is called Manifest Destiny. And so he learned that the land could be called a name, so he called it mine. And so he learned it could be bordered with blood, and so he called it conquest. And so he learned that the land was willing to give fruit and flower, and he called it profit. And so he saw other folk planting and praising, and he called them enemy. And so he saw there were armies to guard these flowering folk, and he called them prey. And so he saw the ocean, and what was it but a highway to make borders? And so he saw the bright and peaceful sea, and he littered it with trade, the bodies stacked next to the crops, the textiles, and the rot of disease. And so he ground hope and God into dust and called it rights. And he heard the wind blowing joy over its people, and he sliced it up with law. And he kept slicing for 500 years. And he built his things around him, and so his coffers never emptied. And so he took wives and made children, and so he gave them too a price. And so he saw each blade of grass and counted it as currency. And so his blood was transfused with gold. And so he built a wall around himself to keep his riches in, the walls encased with bone. Even his heart, a fortress of muscle and money. Listen now, your past and future generations. Your hoarded hall will spoil where you stand. This next poem is called Redlining. Oh, what? You thought I didn't belong here. You thought your street was me-proof? Thought here was a place only lilies could grow? Can you hear my skin before you see it? Can you hear the rap I'm blasting down your perfect street? Here, take it. Every beat will fight for me. If you can hear it, that means I'm winning. That means you can't hurt me here. Means I'm belonging if it's the last thing I do. Did you hear the one about the Black girl who just wanted to mind her own business in a country, state, city, suburb, where their only business is making sure I'm not here? Where my face, my body, my God, my hair, even my right to write this sonnet right here, is policed, is stared down, is burned fast as ether. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Louisville Seminary. My name is Louetta Perkins. I am a D-Min student, and I will be reading from Sacred Self-Care, Daily Practices for Nurturing Our Whole Selves. And the author is Dr. Shaniqua Walker Barnes. And she is a professor at Columbia Theological Seminary. She's a womanist theologian, and she is a clinical psychologist and preacher. So I'm going to read from day 2, and the title for that chapter was Self-Care is Self-Love. You were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only don't let this freedom be an opportunity to indulge your selfish impulses, but serve each other through love. All the law has been fulfilled in a single statement. Love your neighbors as yourself. 2 weeks after my 13th birthday, I hit a physical and mental breaking point. a vortex of acute back and neck pain, high blood pressure, weight gain, insomnia, and chronic self-doubt that was exacerbated by, if not caused by, self-neglect. I had a bit of putting other people's needs ahead of my own, promising myself that I would focus on myself after everything else was done. But it was never done. The more I did, the more people wanted me to do. After all, why wouldn't they? I was highly dependable, self-reliant, and skilled. Just the type of person you could give something to and trust that it will be done. It didn't help that I had internalized the idea that it was my Christian duty to serve others above all else. That service and suffering were opportunities for salvation and sanctification. I thought it was a sign of God's favor that my service was so highly desired by my employer, my family, my church, and my community. And I definitely didn't want to block God's blessings. Unfortunately, I'd come to learn I was not alone in these beliefs. The first time I taught about self-care for my congregation's women's ministry in early 2003, several women confessed that they had trouble caring for themselves because it felt selfish. In the 20 years since, I've heard that sentiment more than I can count. Until recently, in fact, if you started typing self-care is into the Google search bar, the first auto-completion option would be selfish. Self-care is not selfish. It is not about being exclusively focused upon our needs, pleasure, and well-being without consideration of or regard to others, which is how dictionaries define selfishness. When we recognize ourselves as a sacred gift of God, who is meant to be in relationship with other beings who are also wonderfully and beautifully made in the image of God, self-care becomes a fulfillment of the second part of the Great Commandment. Love your neighbors as yourself. Self-care is self-love. When Jesus responded to the legal expert's question about what is necessary to gain eternal life in Luke 10, he assumed self-love as evident. Love of self, therefore, is not at odds with love of others. Jesus underscores this twice more in Luke 10. First, in the telling of the parable of the Good Samaritan, whose care for a wounded stranger did not prevent him from continuing his own journey. And second, in his praise of Mary for practicing presence in contrast to Martha's frantic servanthood. Paul reiterates the theme in Galatians, telling us that while selfishness is a hindrance to both freedom and love of neighbor, self-love is a prerequisite for neighbor love. So, today's practice, think about someone whom you deeply love and whom you wish the very best in life. It could be a child, a partner, a sibling, a friend, or even a younger version of yourself. What would you tell this person about caring for themselves? How do your wishes for that person differ from how you currently care for yourself? Once you've identified the answers to these questions, is there one way you could choose to show yourself self-love today? This is my reading. Thank you very much.
Thank all so very much. Dr. Lou is my Dean-Min advisee, by the way. Our next group and our final group, thank you all so very much. It's been a transformative experience. Krista Rue, Deshaun Price, Dr. Amy Powell, and then myself. And then we will have closing remarks. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Krista Rue. I am a first-year MDiv student here, and I'm going to read from This Here Flesh by Cole Arthur Riley. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. I usually talk really loud, so I'm not used to using a microphone. And I'm just reading a short thing. It's from the chapter on wonder. When we grow accustomed to neglecting beauty, we eventually become creatures of hatred. We lose our imagination, a virtue to which wonder is helplessly tied. Why care for barren land? Why advocate for justice in a system predicated on injustice? We become so accustomed to that bitter taste that we can taste nothing else. Slowly, even mirrors feel like an oppression. We become unable to conceive of anything worthwhile in our own image until we empty ourselves of all beauty and turn against our own bodies in disgust. This is a path that ends in numbness. It is disillusionment with the chains of the world that lead us to become numb to them, accustomed to a life of burden as our appetite for liberation wanes. When we wonder, we loosen the cords that restrain our love, and the people most in love with the thing are prone to become its fiercest protectors. We have found ourselves too busy for beauty. We spin our bodies into chaos with the habits and expectations of the dominating culture, giving and doing and working. Do not blame yourself for that buzzing terror in the back of your mind. It was injected there at the site of our ancestors' enslavement. It takes work to undo that, especially when the oppressor still holds the whip today, ushering us into 60-hour work weeks and minimum wage jobs, detangling the hope of security in front of those who the system ensures will never have enough. And once we name that we do not have enough, the system convinces us that it is our task to do more. We live depleted of that rest, which is the only reliable gateway to wonder. We inhabit an economy of power that views wonder and awe as frivolities or naivete, distractions on the path to liberation. Our remedy is precisely what our ailment derides. Wonder helps us get free. I used to think our neglect of wonder was a function of being numb. It took longer for me to admit that this numbness was the result of trauma and disillusionment. When you become accustomed to pain, it is not unusual to consciously or subconsciously habitually weaken your capacity to experience pain. But as we become less perceptive of pain, we lose touch with other sensations as well, awe and delight included. As psychological wisdom explains, it is difficult to control the targets of our numbing. With the color purple, Alice Walker taught me that wonder does not dismiss pain. It brings us out of numbness. Celie, a young girl who was told her whole life that she was ugly, learns about the godliness of beauty from Shug, her husband's mistress. Shug tells Celie, I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. The story seemed to me more tragic than beautiful, but Walker knew Celie and Shug could not be reduced. Celie's life was more than a grotesque collection of traumas. She learned the language of wonder, and allowing for this awe in her did not diminish the pain of her story. It made her more human. That's where I'm ending. Thank you.
We have Deshaun Price next.
Good evening. There's a short quote from Cornel West. He said, if you can't lead the people, if you don't love the people, if you can't save the people, if you don't serve the people. I'm Deshaun Price. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I have the pleasure of being a career coach, working with 8 prisons, helping prisoners come home and helping them with the reentry program, providing them jobs, education, mental health, stability, and also jobs. And I will be reading today Angela Y. Davis, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundation of a Movement. Ferguson reminds us of the importance of a global context. Following what happened in Ferguson, what is your view of the framework of the new Jim Crow, the book by Michelle Alexander? Michelle Alexander's book on mass incarceration appeared precisely at the moment that represented the peak of organizing against the person industrial complex. It became a bestseller and popularized the struggle against mass incarceration, against the prison industry complex in a very important way. Of course, the argument that she makes about mass incarceration, some of the very structures of civil rights that were fought for during the era of the mid-20th century Black movement is very important. Ferguson reminds us that we have a globalized thinking about these issues, and if I were to be critical and friendly way of the text, I would say that what it lacks is a global context, international framework, and she herself points this out. So this is not something about which she is unaware. In many of her talks, she explains that we also need this broader global context, understanding the working of the produced mass incarceration in the United States. Thank you.
I'm Amy Plantinga-Pow, and I teach theology here, and I'll be reading from a new book by Imani Perry called Black in Blues, How a Color Tells the Story of My People, where she traces the significance of the color blue across African American history. I'm gonna put on my blue glasses. Black people sing the blues. My grandmother did. I do. Our children too. I rage to think of every time this place has broken their young hearts. And our children's children will, if history is any indication, regardless of whether the center holds or keeps crumbling. Some things are terribly reliable, like suffering. But despite the scourge of injustice and the regularity of misery, we have learned to sing and therefore live in a full-throated way without fear of an ugly mouth or crumpled face. What matters is that our voices are thick and honest. This blue-black living and doing is a bittersweet virtue, mastery in heartbreak, and raw laughter from the underside. We people who created a sound for the world's favorite color, the blues, offer a testimony. We have looked to the blue expanses of even our most treacherous landscapes as places of possibility. The North Star in the midnight sky, which led the enslaved to free territories. The celestial morning blue, which somewhere out of sight housed the gates of heaven and relief from endless labor. We have even believed, leaping from slave ships, that the deep ocean waters would return us to freedom by traveling back to the past before the vicious trade in flesh. In the successive waves of reckonings through the steady meanness of life, we have relied upon a blues-soaked sensibility, sustaining, being, and becoming ourselves. Thank you.
My name's Alicia. I'm a first-year MAR student at the seminary, and I wasn't going to speak today, but on the way over here, I kind of felt the spirit stir, which is not something, I'm not normally like that. I don't like speaking without preparing, and I'm really scared right now. But there's, I just wanted to bear witness to something. Probably very emotionally, I'm sorry. So this morning, it was reported that the National Park Service, at the request of the Department of Interior, stripped all mention of the word transgender from the Stonewall Memorial. If you don't know, the Stonewall Memorial is in honor of an incident that occurred in 1969 in which a group of queer people, predominantly people of color, fought back against the police violence that was plaguing their community. The incident began by a woman named Marsha P. Johnson. She was a black trans woman. She picked up a brick and launched it at the group of police officers who were harassing the Stonewall Inn, which was a queer bar. So the Stonewall Memorial, without the mention of the word transgender, it's nothing. And in the words of the musician Grace Baldridge, the bricks launched at police that night compelled me to exist. Because the Stonewall incident was not the first incident of queer people fighting back against police violence, but it was the first time where privileged queer people, white queer people, cisgender queer people from middle class, took notice and took in their own power and joined the fight for liberation. And so as a queer person who is white and cisgender and from a middle class background, that really is very important to me. So I wanted to read from a piece of street art, actually, that I saw when I first moved to Louisville. I moved to Louisville in August of 2020, and I took this picture downtown. It's a piece of street art that is the legacy of the fight for Breonna Taylor and the larger Black Lives Matter movement. And it's an image someone painted, I don't know who, there's not an artist signature, of Marsha P. Johnson, and it lists the names of black trans women who have been murdered. Marsha P. Johnson was also murdered, likely by police. We don't really know. But so I just wanted to read these names out loud today. Sister Tyra Hunter, Venus Extravaganza, Chantel Pick, Laylene Polanco, Crystal LeBay, Homingo Hamar Berryman, Hallie J. O'Regan, Tracy Single, Dominique Ramique Fells, Dorian Quarry, Crevon Fortune, Paris Cameron, Serena Angelique Valenquez, Malaysia Booker, Brenda Tina, Patsy Andrea Delangra, Dustin Parker, Yahira Nesby, Jordan Kofer, Monica Diamond, Johanna Metzanger, Bubba Walker, Isa Failtango, Tony McDade, Alexa Lucina Ruiz, B. Love Slater, Care Legado, Denali Barry Stuckey, Ellie Marie Washstuck, Dana Martin, Brittany White, Pebbles Ladime Doe, Lexi Ebony Sutton, Brianna BB Hill, Kiki Fantre, Penelope Diaz Ramirez, Layla Pelaez, Nina Pop, Paris Cameron, Ghislaine Ware, Chanel Lindsay, Nikki Kuation, Sylvia Rivera, Blaze Reeves, Brooklyn Lindsay, Italy Merlone, Lexi Valera, and Marsha P. Johnson.
heard their names read, and we shall not forget. I'll be reading a very brief reading. I'll name the author after the reading. These are not my words. All of us have the capacity to live lives of faith, courage, and imaginative change. Throughout my many years, says the author, interviewing and spending time with Black church women and religious activists from both the 20th and 21st centuries, I have found their everydayness to be the most inspiring. These women are not out of reach. They are not so extraordinary that I cannot see myself in them and be motivated to take on similar risks for the sake of the good that I imagine for the world in which I live. The stories of civil rights era women and so many others offer broader understandings of the faith commitments that undergirded past victories. These women who remain active in justice movements throughout their lives provide examples for people who want to join the constant struggle to work for the consistent goal for freedom for all creation. Women who took on the fight in the 20th century can point to their faith and belief that the work they were doing was bigger than themselves as part of what sustained them in their efforts. The work of justice and social change was and is God's work, and these women saw it as such. The absence of the Black church in the areas of struggle, including LGBTQIA+ inclusion, rights, healthcare, environmental justice, living wage, and more, has been long. And they, the Black church and the Church Universal, must find ways to work alongside of those who have been filling in the gaps. And the refrain of the song, "Certainly, Lord," often sung during the civil rights movement in response to the question, "Have you got good religion?" forces us to critique not only what is verbalized as belief, but what is realized in action. As it has for millennia, Micah 6 and 8 still proffers a liberative ethic and challenges of reflection. God has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of us, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with our God. These are the words of our Edwards lecturer, the Reverend Dr. Anne Marie Mingo. Her lecture this year, "Can I Get a Witness? Cultivating the Courage of Moral Leaders." We invite you to our Edwards lecture this year on Thursday, February 27th, and the broader Black Church Studies consultation. Information will be following via email and social media. But in the words of Dr. Anne Marie Mingo, we must remember and to cultivate the courage of all of us as moral leaders. Thank you. Thank you all so very much for a wonderful, transformative experience. The words that have been read, we pray, will call us all to love, not just as a verb, but actualized in action. The Black church at the intersection of faith and action, the church at the intersection of faith and action, is what God calls us to and what God requires of us. I want to thank so many on behalf of the Cultural Diversity Committee, on behalf of Black Church Studies, on behalf of a seminary in the time of DEI, values inclusion and welcome, on behalf of a community that will show up to bear witness that we are all called to love and liberation. There are so many people to thank. I'm just so grateful to be in partnership and collaboration with a community that cares. But I do want to name the Cultural Diversity Committee. I want to name the communications team. If I try to name individual names, I will leave others out, and I don't want to do that. But I would like to acknowledge the team approach for so much that has transpired today. The Cultural Diversity Committee, Our communications and events team, who are amazing with making sure the word gets out. We thank all of them. Amen. Our administrative coordinators, who are amazing. They decorated, so we thank God for all of them. Our facilities team and the whole seminary community. And I personally just want to thank our administrators, our president and our dean, Dean Mumford and President Palmerville, and the investment in Black Church Studies, past, present, and continuously. And we want to thank Jill and Beth for their work as well in the context of catering and our book supplies. Our books are from our Black Church Studies collection. Please take a look at it. But there's so many to thank, and we're just so grateful. This event has been happening now for how long? Been a long time. So it's not a new event. It grows every year. There's a song that says every round grows higher and higher. So again, we welcome and thank all of you for joining us, and we hope to see you again back on campus. And we thank members from our seminary community and the broader community for joining in. And as we conclude our time, it is 2:59 p.m. We thank God for all of you. I'd like to offer a prayer as benediction as we go from this place. Let us pray. Gracious God, the God of our past, the God of our present, and the God of our not yet. We thank you, O God, for hearing us and for calling us here. We pray that the words that have been read and proclaimed from authors and children of God from so many places and spaces across time, that it will call us and convict us as we live in community. Help us to experience the love that comes from being liberated by you. Help us all as we grow. Be with us in this, we pray and hope in Christ. Amen. Well, God bless you. We look forward to seeing you very soon. Take good care. Thank you all. Thank you all, everyone.